We're live.
Very good. As I call the meeting to order, I want to announce that due to COVID-19, we have individuals attending remotely as well as on site. All participants joining by phone should mute their phones when not speaking to avoid background noise. During the meeting, please make sure that you announce yourself by name and title every time you speak, so that though the public that is participating knows who is speaking. This is critical given the number of remote participants and is current guidance from the Kansas Attorney General. I'll call the meeting to order. Clerk, please announce the meeting and call the roll.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. You are hereby notified that I've called a special session of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County in Kansas City, Kansas, to be held Thursday, August 19th, 2021 at 5 p.m. in the 5th floor conference room and virtually. It's 701 North 7th Street, Kansas City, Kansas, for a presentation of the 2022 proposed budget. Roll call: McKiernan.
Here.
Ramirez.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Kane.
Here.
Markley.
Here.
Walters.
Here.
Philbrook. Bynum.
Here.
Burrows.
Here.
Townsend.
Here.
Alvey.
Here, and I think Commissioner
Commissioner
Philbrook.
Philbrook.
Yes, I'm here now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we're here for the presentation of the 2021 amended and 2022 proposed budget. I turn it over to Mr. Bach.
Thank you, Mayor. Doug Bach, County Administrator. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon in front of the Commission and the public to present to you the proposed 2022 budget along with the amended 2021. A lot of great effort from staff has gone into this budget, as a lot of effort from the County Commission and input from the public over the coming months. I'll go ahead and ask Ms. Mays to go ahead and put up the presentation for tonight. So as I started to work through the budget presentation this year, I think we had to just give it the road that many people are talking about, and that's the road to recovery as we came out of 2020 and coming into this year. There's many parts of this budget. I'll go to the next slide. As you are all aware, last year we had a very difficult budget. It was one where we came in, we reduced our operational budget overall. We reduced our cash that was going into spending for equipment and projects. We froze our salaries for employees. We had to do the unfortunate thing of having to furlough our non-public safety employees. We did a hiring slowdown into really a full freeze on many different positions. And then we reduced our maintenance activities across the government and our operations to the dissatisfaction of many of our citizens. But we did all this with a thought process that let's take a one-time hard hit into last year's budget, and that would prevent us from having to completely deplete all our reserves. Well, in the end, that did work. We were able to slow down our spending, and the revenue projections we were looking at from last year weren't as bad or did not turn out to be as bad as we'd anticipated, putting us in a position to recover quickly from what happened during the pandemic. Next slide. As we went through the pandemic, we went through many things. We secured funding resources to come in and help us go through this. We collaborated with other community organizations, enabling us to leverage our dollars to a greater extent. We expanded our health department operations like we've never done before and targeted that toward the underserved population. We transformed processes with our staffs. When that came about for the whole CARES program, we were able to implement, spend money in a faster pace than we've ever done. And we provided regular reporting for high accountability to you all and to the members of the public. Next slide. During all this, we also had a good economic development year. Almost $1 billion was announced in new development across our community. This came into various areas, but it was from strong industrial growth, which has always been the bread and butter of our community, and it continued to see the need to be here for distribution and other growth in our community, along with strong residential. Next slide. To just really, as I noted, the industrial piece of it, really, as we take that and we peel back the layers and look at where we had some good investment a lot of things have happened east of 635. It's not all out in the flashy areas where we think around Village West and things like that, or just in the Fairfax. We opened up a new grocery store in the downtown area with the Merck grocery store. Donnelly College invested on 18th Street and built a new building and opened it up. On Central Avenue, we saw two businesses, Split Log Coffee and Slaps, both expand. Expansions they do on their own. Menard's Home Improvement announced a new project in the southeast corner of our community, and they're moving forward to start that construction soon. On the right-hand side of your screen, you see 4 different apartment developments that are moving forward in our community. Boulevard Lofts and the Y Lofts, both in the downtown area, under construction. Lanier Campus has been announced, and it's planning to move forward. Just have to do a few tweaks to its contract, and they'll be ready to go. And the Yards 2 apartments coming forward, where they started. Yards 1 was in Missouri, down in the bottoms. Yards 2 is on the Kansas side of that. And they are so excited about it. They've already started talking to us, even before they broke ground on this project, they started talking to us about doing Yards 3. So this is a high level new living in that area. And then just a little ways from there, our newest destination project in the Rock Island Bridge, which is going to provide new entertainment, event, food opportunities for people to do it right over the top of the Kansas River. So that's an exciting new development that's coming in as they complete their financing, and will be starting into construction next year. Next slide. So what's this mean with growth and development? Well, what we really see is more of a focus what's happening with residential at this time. As we see that chart over the past 5 years has seen a strong, steady growth from year to year. And that comes from both new investment, new housing that's being built in our community, people spending the money to remodel, which has been really, and particularly last year, a marked increase in the amount of money that people spend for that. And the market demand for new housing is also increasing. So that drives our values up in that area. Also, I'll say commercial development, well, not as strong in the percentage area. As I noted before, almost $1 billion announced. We have done this over a period of past years where we have incented to bring in new commercial development. That allows them to go through their incentive programs, and then that's money that pays off in future years. So you'll see on the next slide, that's an area where we look at through our industrial revenue bonds, which is a tool we use for that incentive. And those past 10 years are now coming to a payoff mode. So as we look forward in the next year or two, we start to see a couple of $1 million of new tax dollars coming out. And that's not just paid to us, that's paid to all the taxing jurisdictions in Wyandotte County, the schools, the community college. And as over the next 10 years, that's going to ramp up to close to $15 million in new tax dollars that are coming into our coffers from these new developments that are being built today and have been built over the past few years because of our aggressive going after and bringing in new development into our community. Next slide. All right, from that, we're taking action going forward. With our budget feeling a little bit stronger, we were able to return to our fight on blight. We're able to start mowing like we had been mowing before and taking a lot of action. We understand the long-term infrastructure viability. And while there's money in this year's budget, we still understand that's a long-term fight. And our commission is focused on this point by coming together in subcommittees, focus on what we need to do for the future so we can really expand and put more money into this program. Doing a special focus on infill housing. We've had some success in this area, but it's one where we can continue to grow on. We have to keep our emphasis there and keep pressing hard. As COVID showed us over the past year and a half, changes happen with the way our workforce works. And that's an adjustment we have to make from the unified governance perspective. There's pressures all around from where we are from salary structures, but also different types of environments as far as how the culture of our workforce, how the culture of our environment is, along with different options on working from home in some of those unique positions where we can do that. This budget also looks towards stabilizing our fiscal position and defining where we go with ARPA and spending priorities. So while this budget doesn't really deal with ARPA so much, and that's something this governing body will look at in the coming months after the budget goes through, there's a few immediate things that are built into this. The commission will take consideration on now, but most of that will be a decision that comes about later. And on top of that, we're going to continue our fight on COVID because that's always an increasing, or not an increasing, it's been increasing lately, unfortunately, but it will be there with us and do what we can to stay strong in addressing our healthcare needs in our community. Next slide. All right, so as we look at where we are with the property tax rate and where we have, while this budget does recognize some needs to increase some fees that we have in relation to cost of living adjustments that are built into our contracts for services and federal requirements that come down and say, here's some increases you have to meet this area, there is no proposed property tax rate increase built into this. And I'll remind everyone that prior to COVID, we had worked hard to reduce our mill rate by about 6 mills over the previous several years. Kansas City, Kansas as a city, and we all know that we're the unified government, but we break our budgets out between a city operations for corporate KCK and the county of Wyandotte County. For a city, we're ranked 15th out of the 26 first-class cities in terms of tax rate, first being the highest mill rates there are, and 26 being the lowest. So we're a little below the midpoint in terms of where we are in that regard. And as a county, we're relatively low. We're 95th out of 105, with one being the highest in the state, and we're 95th on that scale. But how's that affect individual household? Because a lot of people will say that they really don't care how we rank on the state. How's that affect us individually? So we kind of took a look at what's one mill worth. And if we were to adjust things from a mill, if you took somebody's value of their house and said, well, let's say somebody had a $200,000 valuation on their house. That means 1 mill that we adjust up or down would save that person $23 a year. Or if it's a business and that business was valued at $500,000, they'd save about $125 a year. So that's, and you can do the math on that. If your house is half the value at $100,000, it's $11.50. If your house is valued at $400,000, it's $46 a year based on that mill. What's that equate to? Just to break it out, 1 mill equal to about 4 hot dogs and 4 orders of fries at Fritz's. So that's an annual contribution that somebody makes for each meal we consider. However, when we get to it and say, what's the impact on us, and 3 boxes of paper for a business, but if we look to it and say, what's the impact on our operations? Next click. 1 mill allows us to pave 10 lane miles across our city. That's a very big impact as to what we do each year, every time we can say that. Additionally, 1 mill is equal to 14 police officers and more than what we spend for our entire code enforcement division when you consider what that 1 mill contributes at about $1.2 million back into our unified government when you collectively look at the full amount. Next slide. Just breaking that down, how your dollars are spent in our community, because we are the county and we do go out and we collect all the tax dollars and we send the tax bill, but we don't keep all the tax dollars. As this slide demonstrates, and this is demonstrated for those people that live within Unified School District 500, we get about 46% of the tax dollar. 23% goes to the city of Kansas City, Kansas. 23 cents goes to Wyandotte County. The majority goes over to the other areas, the educational institutions, the library, and of course the state of Kansas gets a 1.5% of the share that comes into it. And within the package that's going out today, we break this down between all the different school districts, so it's there and available for people to see if they live in the Turner School District, Bonner School District, or the Piper School Districts. All right, so as we move forward from here, we look at our shared goals and the items we looked at in building this year's budget. Number 1, we get out there and we go through and break out where we are with the commission priorities. We've had a lot of discussion with the governing body about this as we go through workshops and sessions. We talk about these 7 areas, what are the highest priorities and how we build those into where we're spending our money, where we're focusing our money. We also take a look at where we are from the community survey that we did at the end of 2020 and balance that in. Maintenance of city streets has been high on that list, and it has been in previous surveys. So we look at those. These are the top areas that our public's telling us to look at. Additionally, As you know, we started doing public hearings early in this year. We had citizens come in, offer input. Where do they think we should spend our money in this year's coming budget as we plan for it? We also conducted a citizen stakeholder survey. We needed to do all this early. That way we could think about it, work on it as we try to build it into our budget, rather than come into the last final minutes and say, oh, let's change something now or whatever. It gives us months to work on it, for you all to hear it, for us as staff to build into it and go back to our department heads and say, okay, this is where we need to focus and this is where the emphasis goes for this year's budget. Next slide. All right, so with that kind of gives you an overview. I'm going to have our finance staff come in and talk through the finances, and then we'll get into the major initiatives for what in this year's budget. So with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Debbie Johnser, our Deputy Chief Financial Officer, along with Reginald Lindsay, our Budget Manager, to take the next steps. Debbie?
Thank you, Mr. Bach. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm Debbie Johnser, Deputy Chief Financial Officer. I'm going to talk about the revenues for the 2022 budget, and then I will turn it over to Reginald Lindsay, our Budget Manager, for him to talk about the expenditures. So this first slide shows total unified government revenues, which includes revenues for all the budgeted funds for the city and the county. This includes all tax levy funds, special revenue funds, and the enterprise funds.
Debbie,
Yes,
could you get a little bit closer or somehow a little
Okay.
soft?
is that better?
A little bit better, yes, thank you.
Okay, I'll try to talk a little louder. Total budgeted revenues for 2022 are $403 million. As you can see by the graph, our revenues are very diversified with a mix of tax revenues, charges for service, intergovernmental revenues, permits and licenses, and fines and fees. Overall, property tax revenue is the largest source of revenue at 25%, with the next largest being sales tax revenue at 20%. Then followed by charges for service at 16%. What's included in charges for service are the trash collection fee, sewer fees, shelter rentals, events fees, things like that. And then the fourth largest category for the unified government is franchise fees at 11%, which this revenue includes revenue from utility companies that operate within our county, such as electric and water, sewer, phone, cable, etc.
Debbie, could you
Yes.
just clarify something? So we'll go back to the slide. So again, what we're talking, this is just really for public knowledge. This is revenue is at 39 million from what was the proposed budget for 2021, which anticipated much more significant revenue losses from sales tax and some from fees. But the revenue actually proved to be better, but that what we're doing is accounting for that we actually did not turn out as bad as we thought it would last year.
That's correct. That's correct. When we went through the budget last summer, we were right in the middle of the pandemic, and we didn't really know how this was going to impact us for the entire year. So we reduced revenues in 2020 as well as the 2021 budget. So yes, revenue built in here is 39 million over the original 2021 budget.
Thank you. Commissioner McKiernan?
Thank you. Hey, Debbie, I know that occasionally in our revenue sections of the budget, we have numbers that are basically there for accounting purpose. They don't represent real dollars coming in. We have to account for the money in, we have to account for the money out, but it's not real revenue that we can spend on city and county services. Does this chart include any of those accounting numbers, or is this all real revenue that can be spent?
Now, it does the annual appropriation revenue, which is listed at 3%. That does include that's the annual appropriation on the star bond revenues or the star bond issuances that we need to include in our budget.
Okay, I want to make sure that everybody understands that some of the numbers that are being shown here do not represent dollars that can be spent on services. They are dollars that come in and they go out. We have to account for them, but we can't pave a lane mile of roads with them. So just so everybody's clear on that, that 39 includes some of those numbers in addition to real dollars.
Well, in 2020, the 2021 original would have included that. So as well as the 2022 budget. So, and that accounts for about, I believe that's about just under 10 million is that annual appropriation. So this 39 million would have been an increase over the original 2021 budget. That annual appropriation was already built in.
No, I completely understand that. Relative, if we're saying it's 39 up, but when we look at that total number, we have to keep in mind that some of those dollars cannot be spent on services.
Okay, any other questions?
No, thank you.
Okay. We'll go on to the next slide. This one breaks out the city and county general fund revenue. So on the left side of your screen, we're looking at the city general fund total, which for revenue is budgeted for 2022 at 172 million. If you'll recall from the previous slide, for overall revenues, property tax revenue was the largest. On the city general fund side, that's not the case. Sales tax revenue is actually the largest and accounts for 29% of total revenues, which generates 50 million. Franchise tax is the second largest at 24%, and it generates about 40 million, with property tax revenue being the third largest at 16%, which generates 28 million for the city general fund. As you know, sales tax is much more volatile than property tax, and when economic conditions such as the pandemic cause rapid changes in the economy, the impact can be greater on sales tax than it is on property tax. So last year when we had to reduce revenues, the impact was greater on the city general fund side than it was on the county. And you'll see here the graph for the county shows revenues at total revenues at 75 million, with property tax being the largest at almost 60%, which accounts for 45 million of the total on the county general fund side. Sales tax revenue is 11%, which is about 8 million of the total. When the county, with the county general fund more reliant on property tax revenues, it's not as impacted to the same degree as the city general fund. This next slide just shows a breakdown of the fund balance for the city general fund. The 2020 original budget was set at 154 million, which was about 6 million lower than the 2020 original budget. And that was due to our budgeting a little more conservative, not knowing where the year was going to end. We know that revenues did come in better than expected, and this allows us to increase the revenues for 2021. We have the amended revenues at 177 million and the proposed 2022 budget at 172 million. Wanted to note that also included in the revenue budget is Arpa funding for lost revenue replacement funds. For the city general fund, it's about 24 million that is included and split between the 2021 amended budget and the 2022 proposed budget. And I will have a slide later on that will show that breakout for all the different types of funds for both the city and the county. So with that additional revenue, you can see that our project reserve, the bottom line there, we're projecting our fund balance reserve to be at 28.4% for 2021 and 27.8% for 2022. This does exceed our minimum target level of 17%, which is 2 months of operating reserves.
Can I ask a question? So why, go back to this, is that 28.4% reflective of the ARPA funds coming in, and that's a temporary jump?
That's a portion of it. On a later slide, I'll be able to show you the breakout between what was in 2021 and 2022. But the ARPA funds are a portion of that. But also we had, when we budgeted lower, our expenses lower in 2020, and those revenues came in, some of those revenues are carrying over into 2021.
what you're seeing from revenue replacement there is the lost revenue, or that piece of it. That's what we build back into our budget. So when we projected lower revenues last year, we cut our expenses and then received that revenue in from Arpa that we're able to plug in from the lost revenue. Then that's what we're building back in here to reflect money that we did not get for 2019. And yes, that's a one-time.
Okay.
It'll just be here for this year, next year, and then we will not see that imbalance of more revenue than expenditures based on that. Because as you said, you're looking at 24 million more right here.
So just to be clear, we have not reset the target. This is a temporary blip. It will come back down closer to that 17%, correct?
Yes, it demonstrates to you that we didn't just come out in the 2021 budget and spend all the lost revenue money. We need some of it, I mean, to continue our operations and do things while we build our revenue balance, our revenues back up to where we think they'll get to. But right, it's reflective to show that there is money there over and above what our target revenue is, which can be considered a one-time.
All right. Commissioner McKiernan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would ask, and I've asked this before, and I'll just ask again, when we have accounting entries like the annual appropriation, or when we have something that's unusual, special, like the ARPA funds, that we somehow put a footnote on here or somehow indicate that this is an unusual, not a typical situation. Those of us who don't look at these numbers every day can be misled unintentionally when we see changes that we don't fully understand, like a lot of dollars in a particular place. Oh, those are one-time dollars. Those will never be there again. So if we could make any sort of notation, maybe some footnotes to explain unusual entries, I'll only speak for myself. It would be tremendously helpful. Thank you.
Commissioner, you might note that on the left-hand side of the screen, we did try to note that the fund balance does reflect the ARPA lost revenue.
And I appreciate that, but that one blanket statement over there does not necessarily, I can't immediately translate that all the way over to the other side. And so,
Okay.
whatever, that's fine.
All right.
I think just an asterisk there on the target reserve with a footnote over there indicating why that is an aberration, because it is an aberration. Commissioner Philbrook?
So to hammer this home a little bit more, is there a problem with adding another line that just literally just spells out that amount of money in there for the additional revenues, that you just separate it out, put another line in there? Because you got transfers in and you got revenues. Can't we just add another line that says this is ARPA money put in there?
Yes, we could do that.
Okay, I think that would make it much more plainer to those of us that need additional help, and I would be one of those people. Thank you.
Commissioner McKiernan?
And one other thing, you know, Doug, I do appreciate the fact that there is that bullet point over to the left that says that the fund balance reflects ARPA lost revenue replacement, but I have no concept of what dollar figure is assigned to that footnote. So how much? I get it that it reflects ARPA replacement, but is it $100, $1 million? So I would appreciate some delineation of the amount. That would really help me.
We'll make sure to add that, Commissioner.
Thank you.
So the next slide is the same information for the county general fund. As you saw in the previous graphs, that the county general fund is more reliant on property tax revenues. So this fund was not impacted to the same degree as the city general fund. The 2021 original budget was set at 67.8 million. It's amended at 75.2 million, and the 2022 proposed is 75 million. I will note that this fund also contains ARPA lost revenue replacement funding in the amount of 10 million, which is split between the amended 2021 and the proposed 2022. For the minimum target reserve, you can see that for 2021, our projection is that this fund balance will be at 14%, and in 2022, it will be at 11%. And while we recognize that this is below our minimum target, we do anticipate that growth will sustain the county operations. And so this last slide does break out the ARPA revenue replacement funding. So we've got two tables here, the Kansas City, Kansas and funds and Wyandotte County funds. We've calculated the 2020 revenue loss, which is shown in the middle column, and then our estimated amount of revenue loss for 2021. We've got the city general fund broken out, and as I said, it was 24 million for the city general fund, and then we have the special revenue funds, debt funds, and the enterprise funds. The total for the city of Kansas City, Kansas was 31 million in ARPA replacement funds. On the county side, you can see the county general fund broken out with the same information. So that amount, the amount that was included in their revenue budget was 10.2 million. And the total, let's see, the total for all county funds was about 10.9 million. So for both the city and county funds, the revenue replacement was just under 42 million. That's all I have on revenue. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Reginald Lindsay, our budget manager, to talk about expenditures.
The Unified Government's 2022 proposed budget is a $420 million balanced budget where revenue and expenditures are accounted for. It funds 29 state certified funds and funds for over 40 departments that provide 200 services to the community. In the pie chart on the screen, the largest funds are the City General Fund, which is $172 million. Then also the County General Fund, which is a $77 million budget. And then also the Sewer System Utility, which is a $48 million fund, and it's in the enterprise category. The enterprise category in the pie chart is a $71 million budget, and it includes other funds such as Stormwater Utility and our EMS fund. Other fund categories are the other tax levy, total zero, $58 million. Some of the larger funds there are the City and Bond and Interest Fund, and then also the health levy and the aging levy, which provides services to the entire county. And then also we have the special revenue fund category, which equals $34 million, and that includes the dedicated sales tax, which includes public safety and neighborhood infrastructure. And then we also have special street and highway there, and also the tourism and convention fund. Next slide, please. So I'm going to drill down into the city and the county general fund by expenditure type. So there's a $258 million budget that is a balanced budget where revenues and expenditures are accounted for. Also, the highest expenditure category here, as we can see, is personnel. And personnel funds salaries and benefits for 2,400 full-time employees across the government. Our other large expenditure category is contractual services. And some of these expenses include transit services, also trash services for our citizens, and then also software licenses across the government and jail-related costs. Our other category is commodities, and some of the larger expenses here are related to utilities such as natural gas. And then we also pay for fuel from here, and also vehicle parts and office equipment and furniture. And then the next expenditure category is the capital expenditures. And this is where we pay for capital where our cash, it doesn't include debt issuances. So here we pay for projects that are just with cash. And then also, this is where we buy equipment to keep our automotive fleet up to date and also our equipment inventory up to date. Next slide, please.
Can I just say last one thing? So back Debt service is 4%. Debt service simply refers to the interest cost, does not include the principal cost as well, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
So this is a view of the general fund by functional area. And we can see public safety is 55% of the whole budget for the general funds. And that includes the sheriff's department, which covers the whole county, Wyandotte County. And then also we have fire department and police department there. And then we have some other departments, community corrections, emergency management, that do cover the whole Wyandotte County. Some of the other functional expense areas where departments lie are community services. It makes up 13% of the general fund budget, and one of the bigger departments there is Parks and Recreation. We also have transit and neighborhood resource center there, and then urban planning. And then covering the county, we do have the Wyandotte County Coroner that is funded from there, and also our historical museum. Coming in at a close number 3 as far as functional area for departments is general government, which is 12%. And that includes the appraiser's office, also human resources and legal department and finance and the knowledge department. And then at 9% of that pie, we have public works and includes some of the larger functional areas that take care of the infrastructure within the city, which includes buildings and logistics, fleet services, streets, and traffic and engineering. And then at 4%, we got judicial services that include district courts, municipal courts, and a district attorney. Now I'll turn things back over to our County Administrator, Doug Bach.
Thank you, Reginald and Debbie. Appreciate going through the financial numbers. As we look ahead to this year, we're going to talk about some of the major initiatives. So as I look at the next slide, I'll just point out first, and these are not in a specific order, but how I will just walk through them. This budget improves our quality of life by continuing our fight on blight. We're trying to make sincere efforts to go after in this area. We're investing in our neighborhoods with our infrastructure to help attract new development. So there are also, while it takes steps to invest more and put more into capital infrastructure, we are still woefully short of where we really need to be in this category. We maintain equity-centered investment in our public health in that we increased a lot of money in this area in 2020. We're going to continue to spend that money in 2021. And as we look forward to 2022, we need to do the same. So while the pandemic's there, we have an underserved population in health, and we need to continue to invest greatly in this area. We need to engage more to provide better information and be open to our public. We want to address our public through community-based programs. So we put money back into law enforcement areas. We're doing so in a manner that helps us to engage and interact more with our public and our community through our community policing philosophies. We're going to fill positions to make this happen. And this takes a lot of work to it, but these are targeted, going after what the commission priorities are. We're going to take steps to address our workforce culture. Many things came about and were highlighted in the last year as far as how our culture works with our public and how we work together. We've already started some diversity and equity training within the government, and we'll continue to take other steps in that regard. And we're reinstating our emphasis to go cash-funded capital projects and not just put everything toward debt, which we had to deter from last year. And now to go into each of these in more detail, I'm going to call upon my assistant county administrators to walk through the upcoming slides. First, I'll recognize Emerick Cross.
Doug, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. So initiative number 1, like Doug stated earlier, is to improve the quality of life by continuing our fight on blight. And that's a major challenge. And here are some of the ways we're going to do that. The first initiative we're going to do is the Clean and Complete Streets initiative. And basically that's just spending to achieve the goal of complete streets. It's going to take money and it's going to take a lot of effort. Another thing we're going to do there is changing treatments of our streets and implementing microsurfacing. Another thing we're going to do is investing in pothole patchers. These pothole patchers are very efficient, very effective, and much quicker than the way we used to deal with potholes. And that's a situation and an issue that we deal with across the city, especially after cold and brutal winters. We're also created a strategic plan in repairing our city streets. This is not just reacting anymore to complaints or issues that come in regarding our streets. We now have a strategic plan in place to deal with this. Another thing we're doing there is increasing funding for our street maintenance. All it takes is money, right? And we've also realigned the budget to prioritize street repair. Now this issue is paramount in our budgeting process for that. The second initiative we're looking at here, and the first is the abatement and rehabilitation. We've upgraded our tracking system for code enforcement. It's an improved system for tracking code issues, which can be complicated at times with due process. And we've also initiated a hard case team for our tougher abatement property cases. As like I mentioned earlier with the previous one, sometimes these are very complex and complicated. So we've initiated this hard case team to deal with those type of tougher issues and tougher cases. And also we've launched an app for illegal dumping and graffiti problems. As we know, in parks, we've had a lot of problems with graffiti. Dumping's been an issue for a long time. And this app hopefully will help us in at least minimizing those issues. The final initiative here is for community development. And that's focusing on our master planning process in areas such as Central Avenue, Armourdale, the Northeast area, and the creation of the historic Northeast Trail. And one thing we're really going to do and focus on from here on out, and you'll hear this throughout the presentation, is focusing on more listening through community engagement efforts. Through our departments, we're going to listen more. We're going to have more community engagement events where this gives our citizenry the opportunity to public engage and to come in and tell us exactly what are the issues, where are the issues, and what's priority to them. So we're going to focus intensely in that area. Next slide, please. Now, another thing in improving quality of life by continuing our fight on blight is increasing our sanitary service fees 5%. And this is due to that EPA consent decree. And finally, a 25-cent contractual increase for our waste management trash service contract. So with that being said, for those items, I will now turn it over to Assistant County Administrator, Mr. Alan Howes. Alan?
All right, thank you, Mr. Cross. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Initiative number 2 focuses on investing in neighborhoods to attract new development. And as commissioners are well aware, neighborhoods are the heart of the community.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I didn't notice. I have a couple of commissioners. Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My comments will be very brief. It's pertaining to what Emmerich brought about the EPA consent decree. I just want to make sure the community knows that the 5% increase is we are federally and contractually required to. And so I just want to make sure that's not because we are choosing to as a unified government, as a governing body, it's we have to. And if we don't follow the increase, we could be legally liable within the federal government. It's the federal government who is telling us that we have to do this. I just want to make sure that's clear and that the community knows that. Thank you.
Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioner Townsend. Could we go back to, I believe it's slide 28. Yes, that's the one. The fight on blight absolutely needs to continue. My question is, does the SOAR program continue to live as we knew it? That emphasized boarding up and or demolishing vacant houses, cleaning up the trash. I see the abatement and rehabilitation for 3.6 million, absolutely needed. Streets, of course, that's infrastructure is a big issue, but will the SOAR program continue as we know it? for dollars that are being allocated in this budget? Thank you.
Sure, I will say yes. It continues as you know it, even with a little bit more. We've added some additional staffing or redirected some of the staffing positions that were vacant into our code enforcement unit. So we'll have additional staff in 2022 to fight this. We put in place our second abatement team at the beginning of this year when we saw our revenues were coming back as we had anticipated initially to do in 2020, but we've done so now in 2021. We still have our demolition project in place, but our emphasis is if we can save a house, that's our first move, but that program is still in place. So the short answer is yes, and a little more.
All right, thank you very much.
And Commissioner Philbrook?
So now, can we go back to that slide that we were just on, please? Thank you. On the clean and complete streets, I want to make sure that I'm understanding that also. Does that also include the mowing and making sure that people are capable of walking down the sidewalks because we've actually mowed along there, or is that part of it?
Commissioner, Public Works will continue to mow the right of ways. And we will also have a spraying program as well. So yes, that will continue.
In a more intense fashion, I'm hoping.
Yes, that's noted.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that people understood that, because of course that's one of the biggest complaints I get. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay. Well, moving forward here, initiative number 2, investing in neighborhoods. So as mentioned, neighborhoods are at the heart of the community, and we sit within the metro region, so we compete against surrounding jurisdictions as a place to live, work, and raise a family. So attracting and retaining residents is critical, not only for the health and vitality of our neighborhoods, but also for the finances of the unified government. And
Alan, I'm
yes.
sorry, Commissioner Kane has a question.
Yeah.
Emery, could we go back to the waste management thing, please?
Yes.
Okay, and we're required to give them a 25% a month increase, correct?
Yes, contractual increase. That's correct.
Well, I've got people over here by Wyandotte County Lakes, been 3 weeks since they've had their trash picked up. And maybe that's a contractual cost of living. I just like them to do their job for once. And it's not just in District 5, it's all over. And whatever we're doing, we need to change the process and get it where our trash is what we pay for. They perform their job function, and they're not. And it's an ongoing every week process. It's 3 weeks by Wyandotte County Lake that the trash has not been picked up. So I'd hate to see these guys get any kind of increase until they start doing the job they're supposed to be doing in the first place.
Yes, sir. Understood.
Okay, Alan, I think that's it right now.
So
All right.
to keep moving here, so we are seeing the results of some of the efforts to attract infill development and focus on infill and affordable housing. We see that in the census information that was actually just released last week that saw population within Wyandotte County increase 7.5% over 2010. It was the most significant population increase since 1960. And it's the highest population count since 1980. So we're seeing people returning and attracted to Wyandotte County, and this is really a function of having great neighborhoods. So this focus on infill and affordable housing, stormwater management, I'll start with that one on the far left there. That is about protecting life and property within neighborhoods. If you went to Wyandotte County Museum this year, you'd see a great exhibit on what happens when unmitigated stormwater rampages through the community in the 1951 flood. And so protecting our neighborhoods via stormwater is critical. We also know that current needs dwarf the available funding for stormwater, and this has been certainly a source of discussion with the commission for some time. So this budget focuses on enhancing to meet those current and for future needs that we've applied for and gotten WIFIA program funding within the EPA. So trying to access additional federal resources to meet this need. And we'll speak a little bit more on stormwater in the budget here in the next slide. The infill and affordable housing, this is the budget for our land bank. And the focus of that land bank and that effort has been on returning land bank parcels back to productive use. So bringing new residents, new tax dollars, new vibrancy to neighborhoods by bringing new rooftops to neighborhoods. We've seen dozens of new housing starts on land bank parcels just in this year alone. And in 2020, we saw over 500 remodeled properties all across the county. In the land bank, we've had 78 homes that have been rehabbed since 2016, 11 alone in 2020, with $5 million in increased appraised value as a result. And we're seeing options being placed on land bank properties for homes and multifamily units totaling upwards of $26 million in appraised value. Again, this is the kind of infill development that we're encouraged to see. This infrastructure for the future, the economic vitality of the city rests upon a foundation of infrastructure. This budget continues to focus on investing in renewing infrastructure in older neighborhoods, as well as preserving infrastructure in newer neighborhoods through the use of techniques like microsurfacing. However, as the commission is aware, we face significant challenges with sort of broadly deteriorating infrastructure across different asset classes, from streets to buildings to stormwater. And so while there's significant investments in this budget on capital infrastructure, it does fall short of the long-term infrastructure needs. And this is something the commission is really beginning to grapple with very seriously through the infrastructure subcommittees that have been put into place and are starting to meet. Next slide.
Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The only question I have, Alan, you may have explained this, but I was not following. So for the infill and affordable housing portion of the initiative, how do we come to the 254,500 as that's the operable amount needed to do what we need to do?
A little confusing. That's actually the budget for the land bank program itself. So it actually doesn't have anything to do with the house, the picture of the house above it, but that's the budget amount for the land bank program.
Okay. Okay. Now I understand. Okay. I was a little confused, so that's why I'd asked. Thank you.
Yeah. Yep. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so on stormwater, within this budget, it includes modest increases in the stormwater fixed fee for residential and goes from what current state, which is $4.50 a month for everybody, every parcel, whether that is a small single family house or a large box store. They're paying the same $4.50. So it creates it proposes a new commercial class of stormwater rates. And this means that commercial will no longer be paying the same as residential. So moving to $6 a month for residential fixed rates and $14 a month for non-residential fixed rates. And the budget also anticipates moving to consideration of a tiered permeable surface rate in future years, and that'll be discussed by the commission after the budget process and would not come into effect until 2023 at the earliest.
Commissioner Bynum.
I think that my question was answered, but to reiterate it, what we're saying here is that for the 2022 budget only, we would go to a $6 a month residential, $14 a month non-residential fee, but that would be in place only for this budget year of 22, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Kane.
Shoot. Can you hear me?
Yes.
What does that do to the farm community? Hello?
Yep.
Commissioner, you're referring to an ag parcel?
Yes.
Okay, these assessments will maintain, if you're receiving a $4.50 bill now, you would then get a $6 one. If you're not in it, it's not going to be a change. The
Okay, thank you.
permeable surface rate is something that we still contemplate that you all will address and hopefully work on before the end of the year. But I think that's what you're thinking of, because we had started to break out when they were having discussions about this. So it's strictly on those. It's the same bills that are in place today.
All right, thank you.
Okay. All right, initiative number 3, maintain equity-centered investments in public health. Certainly the commission is very familiar with COVID and the effects that that's had on the community. And the commission has shown great leadership this year in its efforts to fight COVID. It's also shown the importance of public health and having effective public health and promoting health and wellness within our community. And I'd say our health department, as you all have recognized, has been at the forefront of responding to the pandemic and has tried to do so in a way that recognizes historic health inequities within Wyandotte County. So this budget continues to keep that focus and to improve both health and that focus on equity. So in the fight against COVID, continuing to allocate resources to ensure that residents have the resources they need to prevent and fight COVID. So this is free testing and vaccinations, free transportation to vaccines and testing, free quarantine and isolation stays, includes mobile vaccine events in partnership with community groups and schools and businesses, and community health workers that are being deployed to areas of greatest need to help residents access health insurance, food, housing assistance, job training programs, the full suite of support that is available. We also have the Community Health Improvement Plan, and this has been ongoing now for 4 or 5 years, but really kind of hitting its stride in the last couple of years with the Community Health Improvement Plan. It's about making strategic investments in collective strategies that see long-term improvements in the community's health. So the four focus areas within that CHIP are jobs and education. And last year they implemented the first workplace business ESL program and added more than 350 childcare spots to Wyandotte County, which we know is a dire need for businesses and for residents. The second area is around a violence and violence prevention team. They focused on crime prevention through environmental design, or CEPTED, and completed a successful art installation in Clifton Park. We got a healthcare access team that launched non-emergency medical transportation initiative to give free rides to residents to their healthcare provider. And our fourth area, which is safe and affordable housing, which is planning the implementation of the county's first community land trust pilot. So in each of these areas focused on, again, long-term strategies to improve the overall health outcomes for our community and do it in a way that is equitable across the community. I will turn it now to Assistant County Administrator Bridgette Covens.
Thanks, Alan. I'm investing in public health by prioritizing our greatest needs through programs. Area Aging on Agency launched the CHAMPS program, which is choosing healthy, appetizing meal planning solutions for seniors. And it's a nutrition program that allows seniors that are 60 years and older to choose options for meals outside of the traditional congregate meal sites or our Meals on Wheel program at local restaurants. The IHOP location has collaborated with Aging to offer breakfast, lunch, and dinner. When seniors use their preloaded card, it's a $3.50 for the cost for each meal. And the balance of the remaining cost of the meals will be paid for with the Older Americans Act Nutrition Fund. To date, we have over 100 seniors that have signed up for the program. Area Aging has partnered with Victory Hills Baptist Church, and they will be opening a new congregate meal site for seniors in Midtown Kansas City, Kansas on October the 1st. And that will take us to a total of 8 congregate meal sites in our city. Human Services has a grant program that is used to assist the intellectual and developmental disability population with their unmet needs in our communities. And their services range from horseback riding therapy, dental health, psychological testing, respite care, and physical fitness therapy. Mental health is also a priority when you're investing in our public health, and Human Services offers programming assistance for those who suffer with a dual diagnosis. And these services can include enhanced behavioral support planning, testing and identifying diagnosis needs, and continual of therapy. Next slide, please. I'll send it back to Ellen.
So for initiative 4, it's engage early, provide better information, and be open. Certainly, this is something that I know is close to the heart of commissioners in terms of being able to communicate effectively to the public. So going from left to right here, communicating more and always listening, this budget does contain an expanded focus on communications. It begins to follow through on the communications review that was conducted in 2019 and 2020. And that started with the hiring of Ashley Hand as the new Strategic Communications Director earlier this year. We saw, too, the dramatic expansion of communications during COVID and the impact that can have in getting timely, relevant information to residents through a variety of channels, through print materials, through radio, through Spanish language media, television, even bus wraps. All of those were tools that were used to get information out to residents. We've expanded the use of dashboards to communicate information and data and to tell stories about the community. And we've hired more bilingual employees to reach out to the diverse Wyandotte County residents that we have. We're working to engage networks creatively. Some of these are in response to emerging events with new networks and outreach, such as during COVID with the stand-up of the Health Equity Task Force that brought together a diverse set of voices to help guide and shape the response to COVID in a way that took equity into account and brought community voices to the forefront. Likewise, in response to the death of George Floyd, the mayor convened the Task Force on Police and Community Relations, again, bringing forward a diverse set of community stakeholders to address complicated challenges. So we're doing that kind of communication, but also in our day-to-day work of engaging the community. So through things like the planning department, engaging the Armadale community in creative ways through the master planning process or soliciting input for the Northeast Heritage Trail, and our community policing, as County Administrator mentioned, that is focused on building relationships and trust across our neighborhoods. And lastly, making it easy to provide input. So this is really a two-way street. So making it both easy to get information and to provide input. So in June of this year, we launched the new UG website, and through 2021 and 22, we'll be expanding the capabilities for residents to use digital services so that they can get the services that they need when it's convenient for them. So it may be a time when City Hall is closed, but it's 10 o'clock at night and they can access the information and conduct the business that they need for themselves and their families. And then using things like the community survey to guide efforts across a whole range of service areas across the unified government. So we really focus on how within all of our departments we can do a better job and get better at engaging creatively, at listening, and at using input in making decisions for and with the community. So with that, I will turn it back to Assistant Administrator Covens.
Thanks, Alan. Initiative number 5 addresses public safety through community-based programs. And trust and transparency are vital to the relationships between the police and the community. First, we want to increase our police officers' personnel to the authorized strength. That's essential in bridging the gap between our community and our officers on the street. And hiring staff to monitor and audit our body-worn camera footage. Two initiatives of Chief Oakman's are to create Cold Case Squad to review and investigate unsolved cases from the 1980s through the 1990s, and hiring a Hispanic community liaison to help foster the trust between the Hispanic community and the police department. Partnership and capacity building. Due to COVID-19, our parks have been used more heavily than they've ever been. And the park ranger position will be to monitor activities at our various parks, and the park ranger will be reporting directly to our parks director. The DA's office will partner with the Innocence Project to receive a grant that will allow a part-time administrative assistant to become full-time to support the attorneys and the investigators with the integrity unit. Through the emergency management, the radio system operator will offer an in-house tech support.
Bridgette, we have a bad connection.
I'm sorry.
Well, my internet connection is unstable. I'm sorry. I thought maybe that was, if anyone else has experienced you coming across as garbled. Nope, then it's just mine. Thank you.
That's okay. Going back to the through emergency management, the radio system operator, they'll offer an in-house tech support for our police, fire, sheriff, public works, and emergency management for the day-to-day operations that require communications by way of our radio system. The fire department community paramedicine program is an initiative that Chief Callahan is launching in conjunction with the Vibrant Health and the UG Health Department. This program will provide proactive intervention to individuals who regularly call our 911 line for medical assistance. And the goal is to reduce calls by frequent callers who are calling 911 for non-emergency medical services to lessen the emergency room visits. Next slide, please. Initiative number 6 is filling positions to improve services and other commission priorities. We have a total of 48 key positions that have been held vacant, but will now be filled. 27 of those positions are within the police department, and that will bring us closer to our authorized strength. Of those, we have an academy session that's going on right now, and our goal is to have another academy class that will be starting in the end of the 4th quarter. Lifeguards, we had a challenge getting lifeguards at the Parkwood Pool this summer. So we're working with an outside contractor to oversee the hiring and management of the lifeguards. We are also adding staff to the streets, parks, and technology to fill those gaps. And you'll see that we have the new and unfilled positions. We have a total of 173 positions throughout the unified government that went unfilled. And with those 48 key positions being filled, that will leave us with approximately 88.25 positions that will remain unfilled going for the next year. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Bach.
Thank you, Bridgette.
Doug, can we go back one slide?
Yes, we can.
I didn't catch that. Why are 88 positions going unfilled?
After going through and doing an analysis on priorities from where the governing body is, and so we broke out. Essentially, at this time, I have 323 positions across the government that are not filled. About 100 are in transition. Going through from that. When we go through and we take and reclassify some positions, fill some of the additional ones we think we still need to fill. I believe there's 88 positions that are not aligned as closely to where the commission's highest priorities are and where the community survey has. So at this point, I'm not recommending those positions to be filled going into 2022. And I know the commission has asked for a list of those. I don't have them in the presentation today, but I think that is something we can show during our future workshops.
Thank you.
On the next slide, you'll see some of the positions that we have taken a look at to do to refill.
I'm sorry,
This-
Commissioner Townsend has a question.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioner Townsend. While we were on this slide, with regard to the lifeguards and the private contract, past practice has been based on the number of kids that routinely come to Parkwood and the number of hours of the operation of the pool. Ideally, we'd have about 15 to start off with, 15 lifeguards. With the private contract, though, what provisions are being made for personnel to operate the basket rooms and other supportive roles up there at the pool that are not lifeguards? Will those still be filled by UG personnel?
Commissioner Townsend, this is Assistant County Administrator Cross. We are in talks with that, with the company now, and they have come down to the pool and did a complete evaluation, and it's their policy to operate the entire operation for us. And so that includes the front and the basket room and all those other ancillary positions.
Okay, thank you. Well, when we get more into the contract, will the number of lifeguards be spelled out and the other positions as well?
Yes, and I'm glad you bring that point up. It is their intent and our intent to fully operate that pool at maximum levels next year, including lifeguards and times and hour of operations. But they cannot guarantee that due to this anomaly from COVID, where everyone in the country is after the same guards. So they will operate it as much as they can. I'm glad you brought that up.
All right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Conversation to continue for next year, I'm sure. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Next slide. So this slide, and I'm not going to break through each one, and it's broke out in more detail in the budget document that's out there, but it demonstrates a little bit what I was saying, where we were for vacancies last year to where we are in vacancies today at the note on the left-hand side. But this talks about the positions that we have reclassified in the budget as areas of high priorities to come into and fund up. And you can see that in the first box, as we talked about. Has this been a priority to come in and have a social media coordinator, graphic designer, community engagement officer? So we are taking steps to go in and fill more positions in these key areas where we think it'll better put us in a position to meet all the commission goals. And as noted, this is in your packet to go through in more detail, and then you can reference back into the related budget pages with each of these departments to understand more about each one.
Commissioner Kane.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, one of the things, going back to the pool and the lifeguards, I would like to see that we go to our schools and recruit our kids to be the lifeguards. I know it's a big task, but there's a major concern about that pool. And I'd like to see us have more lifeguards than we need. And I would like to help with that if at all possible.
Yeah, Commissioner Kane, this is Assistant County Administrator Cross. Yes, I have noted that, and I've spoke with Angel Obert, our new Parks Director, and we have you on our schedule to meet with in the near future. And you're spot on about that. The company we are working with, it's their intention to hire as many local kids as they can as part of the staffing option. So that's exactly what they plan to do.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you, Commissioner Townsend. I want to thank Commissioner Kane for his interest in that. And while it sounds easy to get kids from the schools, it's not at all. That's the very problem we ran into and have been for the last several years. I met with the then superintendent 2 years ago. Part of that lies in the fact that the school system at USD 500 does not have the appropriate staffing and or the facilities needed to teach swimming during the school year. And that's when you get the biggest number of kids in one setting. They have to be at school. Transportation is not a problem. So I would applaud and appreciate Commissioners Kane being involved with that effort that was begun several years ago to bring the school district, particularly USD 500. You know, we could get lifeguards from anywhere, but generally, the kids who in the past have staffed the pool at Parkwood are USD 500 kids, although we would take them from anywhere. So that was the problem this year, getting kids to participate and who know how to swim and otherwise would be available to be trained. Of course, with COVID, our training facilities were limited. So it's not as easy as it appears, but we will continue. And I think the contracting is a good idea, and to use as many KCK, USD 500 kids or kids from any other school district who want to act as lifeguard is good, but we won't be solely reliant on one source. Thank you.
Mayor, if I may, this is Emerick Cross, Assistant County Administrator again. Commissioner Townsend, that's exactly right. It's very difficult. We had about 20 applications and got one guard that passed through that program. So to your point, it is extremely challenging. However, we are working with another agency organization to establish lifeguard and swimming classes training at USD 500 pools. And we have made contact with USD 500 to initiate talks to set that up. I don't really honestly think it's going to happen this fall because of what's going on with the virus and everything, but we're certainly looking hopefully in January to initiate that program as well. But we'll bring more information to you as that evolves. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Cross. Next slide. The next initiative addresses workforce culture in compensation within our government. And as we noted early in the presentation, when Mr. Lindsay was going through where our expenditures are, you noted that 70% of our budget goes toward our staffing. So in order to address this and make any real dent, we have to make a significant additional contribution to it. And with this in this budget, in order to do cost of living increases, health insurance increases, and then have some type of competitive compensation programs put in place for our employees. We're estimating that at around $10 million, or building in about $10 million into our budget to work for this effort. Additionally, last year we did an employee survey. We talked to them, we tried to get information from our employees about ways they felt like they could be more involved in the work environment. One of the key things our employees asked about was additional training and ways to work with some of the other employees that maybe weren't being held as responsible going through that. So we've built in some new programs that we're engaging this year and next year. And we've also put in a new program for diversity, equity, inclusion training, which we've already started. And we intend to get through most of the employees this year and continue that into greater detail as we go into next year. I think all of these things are going to improve the overall environment that we have in hiring employees and bringing them into our organization, but especially retaining good employees that we have here and rewarding them for good work and teaching them and giving that ability to do the work they can.
Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say I support this 100%. Us investing in our workforce and our employees, as Commissioner Kane always talks about and always mentions every time we bring up employees, we have amazing men, women, and youth in our community who are willing and able to do the job of working in our government. And so if we're able to keep our wages competitive with the surrounding municipalities, we can tap into that. We can tap into the talent that we have here in our community, and also finding people within the organization and raising them up and letting them and moving them up the ranks. I think this is a step toward that. And so I hope that we continue in each budget going forward, that we continue to invest in our employees because if we don't have employees, then we don't have the services to provide to the community. And especially after last year, having to furlough non-public safety employees. I think it's a great step to show to our employees that we care, that we hear you, and that we will continue, and I'm sure as a commission, we'll continue to invest in you so that that we care about you and that we want to make the unified government an amazing place to come work. And so I'm very happy that we have this part of our budget this year. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment, Commissioner. And I think that probably gives me a little bit of a gateway to just make an announcement as she's pictured in this. Today, I announced the formal appointment of Bridgette Covens as an Assistant County Administrator under government. She's been serving as an interim since the beginning of the year. Many people don't know that Bridgette started in this organization as a data entry clerk back in the 90s and moved herself through the ranks, educated herself, went through and all the way up through her master's degree, and at the same time of going to different positions. So your comments are spot on about ways to continue to get people to come here, they can start work, and they can move through our organization and find their way to all the way to the higher levels of our management structure if they choose to. So I appreciate those comments, and I think continuing to take steps and taking additional steps this year to encourage that is a big goal of ours. Next slide. And then the last one that I mentioned was going after reinstatement of cash funded capital purchases. Nothing is flashy, I guess. This is last year, though, we just cut these back because we were concerned about not having enough cash on hand to get through the year with COVID. So we've reinstated that this year, and we'll continue to beef that up as we go forward, as this was a directive of the commission that we wanted to put less reliance on debt and more reliance on cash funded projects so we don't have to pay for so much into the future. Next slide. And with that goes through the major points of the initiatives we have in this year's budget. I'll talk just for a minute about the calendar and then talk about the budget document that we have. As this governing body is aware, we've invested a lot of time already. Back in March, we went through and had public hearings for the public to offer input. We did a citizen stakeholder survey for people to submit information. Those came in through the survey. We also had written information submitted in. A couple of special sessions were dedicated to going through the capital projects that we have in the budget. We did workshops in May and in July to go through, offer input of the direction we're going. So hopefully the budget, as you will review through it, we'll see that it is in line with many of the actions and comments that we received from you all and from the public as we went through these days. And then we still allow for a few days to come back and work through in workshops after the presentation. On the next slide, it shows where members of the public, if they would like to go access our budget, you can type in here and go to it. You can go to, just by going to our website, it's about 3 clicks, I think, to get to it, but this will move you there more directly if you wanted to go in and pull up our budget document, which is all online. It's a little over 900 pages, so there's a lot of reading there, but you can get to the index, find out the area you want to. If you move to each department, you can pull it up and get a summary of what's going on in that area, and you can focus on areas that you find of greater interest. I think for the governing body, our intent tonight was to go through and give you an overview. Obviously, we can't go into the detail of 900 pages in the last hour and a half that we spent with you tonight, but we were able to go through and hopefully answer some of your questions, provide you some guidance as you're able to read through the documents and see where it is and find ways to answer some of your questions. But if you do have questions before we come up to our first workshop, please feel free to contact myself, any of the assistants, or our finance team, and we'll do what we can to answer that. I think additionally, I would ask that if commissioners have workshop topics, you might want to submit those to the mayor. So if there's something we want to dig into in more detail, we'll have those to consider, and we can prepare for those in advance as we think about calendars of things we'd like to work through. And with that, I will say I'd also like to express a great thank you to my budget team who spends many hours. They start back with the departments early in the year. They go through it. They dig through with them to find out what the departments need, what they're going with. They build into their budgets. Then they go through the preparation. They spend time working with me. In this budget document, you'll see on one of the first few pages, again, our budget last year was awarded the Distinguished Budget Award from the Government Finance Officers Association, and it'll be one we'll submit for again next year. But if my budget team is on, I'd ask you all to turn on your camera, because I'd at least like to, if we were in the commission chambers, I would ask them to stand up and recognize them. But Reginald Lindsay and his team has a very good budget staff to work through this. I'm not seeing too many. I see Michael Peterson popping on there. And of course, you had Debbie Johnsher, and of course, Kathleen Von Anschut, our Chief Financial Officer, who is not able to be with us tonight, but she invests hundreds of, not thousands of hours working toward the budget. So thank you all for all your hard work and dedication and helping put this together. And with that, Mayor, present to you the amended 21 and proposed 2022 budget.
Thank you, staff. Thank you, Doug. Thank you for all of your hard work, very thorough work. To say I appreciate the way that this presentation was made, focusing in on commission priorities, which again reflect community priorities as we discovered in our surveys throughout the years. Clearly, the community continues to speak for the need for infrastructure improvements, blight remediation through code enforcement and other measures. Those are the kinds of things that the commission is digging in very deeply. So again, bringing a budget that aligns with the priorities of the commission and the community is necessary, and the way it was presented demonstrated that alignment. So thank you for that, and recognize Commissioner Philbrook.
Thanks, Mayor. I appreciate that. Doug, I mean, the changes that have been made over the years in how we work on the budget has just been phenomenal. And all the things that have come forward that lets us do more of a priority-based budget and get down into it is just been, I don't know, overwhelming and wonderful. Be careful what you ask for. By golly, you're going to get it, which is more information, but we need that to help create that policy and the guidance that y'all need to create that budget. So thank you so much, team. You guys are just really phenomenal, and we really appreciate all the help that you're giving us. And one last question, Doug, would you share with the community again the let's see, how do I want to say it? The place to put in the questions and suggestions for the ARPA money. Will you share that?
Yes, I'll be happy to. I don't know that if someone has it here in front of them tonight to be able to pull up on the screen for our commissioners. I don't have it. Right.
That's okay. You don't need to, just say it. And people that are listening can write it down or listen to it again. Thank you.
Debbie, are you pulling it up?
I don't have that right this second.
Let me see here.
Ashley, do you have that?
The website for ARPA
Yes.
is wykokck.org/ARPA. ARPA.
Thanks. Sorry to put you on the spot, but
No problem.
we needed to share since it's something that's involved with our budget already. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. That concludes our budget session for the evening, and we're back on the 26th.